We got work to do.
Welcome to Highway to Hell, a supernatural podcast. I'm Christine.
And I'm Pudding!
Oh my God. Did you pull your pants down?
What if I did?
Wouldn't you like to know?
Oh, man. Great moment
was
from this episode.
So good. Yeah, I did enjoy that. Thank you for that intro.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna call you Pudding from now on.
Yes, please do.
So this is about season 5, episode 11, Sam Interrupted. And our IMDb description is pretty good this time. It says that this is the episode when a former hunter calls Sam and Dean for help from inside a mental institution. The brothers get themselves admitted as patients to check out his claims of supernatural phenomena. When their incarceration pushes them both to the breaking point, their personal issues send them over the edge. So that's kind of cool. It doesn't go into the monster or anything.
Yeah. It's a pretty good description.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very curious to know right off the bat if you enjoyed the episode, if you enjoyed the comedy specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for asking. I'm kind of struggling.
Okay. Yes. Go on.
Parts of it I really loved. They were very funny, and it was like, a good overall episode. But then it was also like there are just some very specific things I have issues with. Like I can't really decide how I feel about how they handled like mental disabilities or like psychiatric issues. I mean, maybe this was like back in like the early 2000s, right? It was still like 2009, so not really. But when that kind of thing was funny, like it makes me think about the burger, that part toward the end where they get put into the psychiatric hospital and then they like break out in song and there's like a whole dance routine at the psychiatric hospital.
Right. I know I struggled with the term thraped.
Oh,
in particular,
that's a whole bag of what is the can of worms? I was gonna say bag of worms.
Yeah. Bag of worms.
Ew.
I mean, a bag can be bigger. I mean, maybe that's what it is.
It's like a really big bag.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I loved a lot of the moments, and then some of it was just like, oh, that's a little troubling to me.
Yeah,
and I was just
that's kind of rude.
I was curious because, I mean, did you check out who the writing team is?
Just before we started this, we've got Andrew Dabb and Daniel Laughlin.
Yeah.
So you clearly have something about that.
Well, it's the same writing team behind your favorites, Yellow Fever.
God damn it! I knew it.
What are the other ones?
All of the other problematic episodes.
Yes, that are funny in some, very, very funny in some instances, and then other times it's just like, whoa, that was a little harsh. I don't know about that. I have some trouble with that. After School Special. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, that explains a lot for me. And maybe they're getting better at it. This one wasn't as much of an issue for me as Yellow Fever was, but it was still like, guys, I don't know. Is that really the best way to like, portray these people? Not really.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how I felt about it overall, but there were some very funny moments and some good characters. I love Martin, but that was my other issue is like, so my two things were like how they were potentially problematic about how they handled people with psychiatric issues, but then how we never found out what happened to Martin.
Yeah, that's true.
The last time we saw
What?
him, he attacked 2 orderlies. That was the last
Oh,
scene he's in.
huh.
Yeah.
I feel terrible, but I didn't even think about that. But
Well, I kind of
now
like,
that you've mentioned it, I was like, wow, like what? Wait, what happened to Martin?
we don't know. And I kind of got like emotionally invested with Martin because of like the like story that they had about him, about what happened in Albuquerque. Like I really did want to know. And he also was so sweet. Like what a sweet man.
Yeah.
And I really like that actor. His name is John, I think it's Grease. He was the uncle in Napoleon Dynamite, as we all know.
Oh my god, I was like, where have I seen him from?
Eating steak and throwing a football.
Oh god, yeah, no, he was
Yeah.
great. I loved him.
I
I
know, I
I
did
felt a lot of
too.
empathy for him, and I wanted to know more about him. Like, why did he end up there? Um,
Me too. And so
is
then
it?
I was like, okay, well, he was, they're trying to like kill the monster at the end. And so Martin attacks the 2 orderlies so Dean could get away. And then that's it. We don't
Yeah, we never
see,
see him again.
no, we don't see him like, okay, back in the psychiatric hospital, like everything's going okay. Or was he like transferred to some facility for like violent patients because now he's involved in their bullshit? Or,
Yeah, or
what
like
happened to
solitary
him?
confinement or something.
Yeah, and also I wanted the moment because I could kind of like feel him getting involved in what's happening with the monster. And he had already told Sam and Dean, like, I can't, like, I would do anything to help you boys, but I can't do it because of what happened to me. But then he ends up getting involved anyway and actually helping them. And so I wanted that moment at the end where it was like, see, you are still a hunter. You're still one of us. It doesn't matter what has happened to you in the past or whatever, I wanted that closure.
Yeah, but there was no payoff right there.
No. So.
God, and it's the same problem that we had with like yellow fever, right? They never like came out and said like, "Hey, this guy was actually, mentally ill and he
Yeah.
was basically tortured by these people. He was bullied by them and
Yeah, they
there
just
was
made him
no
out to be the bad guy and that was it.
right.
Yeah.
So poor Martin. Man, justice for Martin.
Yeah, hashtag
He
justice for
deserves a
Martin.
lot more.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's how I felt about
Oh.
it. But there were some really good moments too, and we kind of, get to the core of some of the issues between Sam and Dean. So we can chat out about all of that. There's good stuff hidden in here. Yeah. It was directed by James Conway. And so I was going to go over some of the actors too. So John Grease was Martin. Laura Gilchrist was Nurse Foreman, the one who ended up being the monster. The Wraith, which is pretty fucking sweet.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I did like the monster.
Me
I
too.
thought it was very interesting. And I loved her explanation of like adrenaline and dopamine levels or whatever make brains
Yeah.
really juicy.
Real tasty.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty cool.
It was good. And then Dr. Fuller, the guy who runs the psychiatric hospital, is Malcolm Stewart. And then Dr. Cartwright, Dean's sexy doctor, is Michelle Harrison. So,
Ooh, sexy.
yeah, hi. I liked all of them.
Well, and it makes sense that she was in his head, right? She's a sexy, sexy
Right.
doctor, and she's not even real.
Yeah, I mean, usually it's just kind of like a ridiculous coincidence that they've set up in the show, and it's like, oh, of course, she's the one that they're working with, and she's super hot. But this does make sense because it's in his head.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any music, nothing to speak of for this episode.
Mm-mm. I did have one note. Obviously, Sam Interrupted is a reference to the book and the movie Girl Interrupted, where our main character, she details her experiences in a psychiatric hospital. And the movie actually stars in, I think, a small cameo, Misha Collins. So he
Hey,
actually comes out in that movie, and I had no idea.
I didn't know that
I
either.
think he plays. either I don't think it's her boyfriend, but like he's kind of like chatting up Winona Ryder in one scene and kind of being a douche and coming on to her and stuff. So he plays a completely different role. It's like I was watching a clip of it and he was just kind of gross and oily
Weird.
and yeah. Yeah, it was kind of weird to see him that way.
Yeah, because that's like the complete opposite of how we've seen him here.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah,
weird.
no, we don't usually see cats that way. So,
um, well, cool. Good to know. I actually have never seen the movie. Um, yeah,
really?
but it was a big deal. Like I remember, hearing a lot about it and seeing clips and stuff. I've just never actually watched the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
Cool. Um, I'll have to watch it sometime.
Mhm. Oh,
Yes.
and I'm sorry, before we do get into the episode, I have one correction, and that is that
Uh-oh.
last episode. It's not that big of a deal, but I just needed to come out because last episode we were like talking about what the watery eyes and how many
Oh,
times they actually
right.
cried, right? And so we did count Dean as one watery eyes, but when I was watching this episode during the recap, they show Sam talking to Lucifer, and he totally had watery eyes during that entire time. And
Oh,
Lucifer was
that's
like,
so true.
My brother called me a freak and a whatever." And so I have now added a point for Sam under watery eyes for that episode because he totally had teary eyes and I
No,
missed
good.
it.
Thank you for bringing that up because we knew too. Like at the end of that, we were like, "Damn it! I don't know if we got them all. I hope so." And there were so many.
Yeah. No, yeah, there must have been more and sure enough.
Cool. Okay. Well, they were just crying all throughout that episode.
It was pretty sad.
Mm-hmm. Anything else before we get into it?
Nope, that was everything.
Cool. Okay, so we open up at Glenwood Springs Psychiatric Hospital in Ketchum, Oklahoma. The scene opens with a woman talking to a doctor at the hospital, and she hasn't been taking her medication. And she says that if she does, then the monsters will come. And she tells the doctor that they killed Annie. And she tries to convince the doctor that the monster is real, but he tells her that Annie died by suicide and that there's no such thing as monsters. He's like adamant there's no such thing. That night, the woman is in her room and she hears something in the vents in the ceiling. And then she looks up at the grate and the screws on the grate start to unscrew and it starts to open. And she screams and looks out of her door. And a man who's in another room across the hall sees her and she's screaming for help. And then the nurses down the hall hear everybody start screaming. And one of the nurses is like, "They're starting early tonight." And they just brush it off. And then, isn't that
Yeah,
crazy? Um,
I hated
I
that
know,
so
me
much.
too. It's really heartbreaking. And then so we see the guy in his room looking across at the woman in her room, and she's still screaming for help. And then she gets snatched away from the window. And then the next morning, the nurse from down the hall opens up her room and sees the woman lying on the floor, and her wrists have been slit, and she's dead. Dun dun dun.
Yep. Um, this was a really fascinating open, like we have the psychiatric hospital, and of course it's like the whole cried wolf scenario because they think, that these individuals who have mental health issues that they're making up this stuff, but of course it's all real. And I hate that kind of thing. Like, it's a great premise because, it just kind of, it really like pulls at your heartstrings for these
Mm-hmm.
characters. And but like I just, oh god, I get so mad. Like, why don't you believe them or like pay
Yes.
more attention to them?
Yeah, I really hate that too. And we've seen it. I'm sure you have. Like, it's something that's used in other shows and movies where it's like someone who is is in a situation where like people wouldn't believe them, but they need to, like something is actually happening and it's so frustrating and ugh.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I hate that
I
too.
think the closest like parallel that I can remember is like the one episode of Buffy in season 5 where literally there's like literally an alien that comes from outer space and like the main big bad of that season is like affecting individuals where they're being I guess placed into mental hospitals.
Mm,
Like that's how drastically she, affects them. And so they're all seeing this like monster, this alien monster, and nobody believes them,
hmm. Yeah.
And it's like, oof.
Yeah, and I hate those things too because I can't imagine anything worse than not being believed. You know?
Oh
Like that
yeah.
just is the worst feeling when you know what's happening and no one believes you. And it's just you feel so
Hmm.
like helpless and I don't know, it's awful.
Hmm. Yeah, it goes to also like whenever there's a movie like a ghost movie with a kid and the
Yeah.
kid is like, "No, really? Really, there's a ghost here." And the parents like, "Shut up.
That's
Like
nice,
there's no such
sweetie.
thing as ghosts." Yeah.
Go play with
And
your
then they
toys. Yeah.
die. I'm
Your
telling
kid
you.
tried to
If
tell you.
if my daughter No, yeah, if my daughter sees a ghost, I'm gonna be like, "Let's get out of this house
That
immediately."
was like the one. What was that episode where there was that family that was trapped in that house when Sam and Dean were trying to help them? And there was the
Oh
kid who
yeah.
like
Yeah.
played ball with the ghost in the. Oh, it was the. It ended up being a
I
real
forgot what it's
person, right?
called, but yeah, they were like in the
Blech.
walls or whatever.
Oh God. And then
Yeah.
it like gets thrown back out, and I was like, oh hell no.
No, yeah. Let's get out
This
of
is the
here.
part where
Listen
I
to your
run
kid.
away. Oh, it was really scary. Yeah, yeah, agreed. It's frustrating and weird. So that's what we're dealing with here, unfortunately. So then we cut to a scene where Sam and Dean are visiting that same doctor in his office, and Dean is explaining that they were referred to him by this other doctor. And so the doctor starts asking Sam some questions because apparently he's supposed to be the patient who was referred. And so he starts analyzing him, and Sam's like, I'm fine, really. I mean, maybe a little depressed, probably because I started the apocalypse. And I was like, oh, this is where we're going. It
Yes, I love this scene.
was really good. I love that so much. He's just so like flip about it. So he starts telling the doctor that he's like, me and Dean are trying to save the world from Lucifer, um, blah, blah, blah. Oh, there's also this angel. And the doctor's like, oh, you mean like an angel on your shoulder? And Sam's like, no, no, his name's Castiel. He wears a trench coat.
So matter of factly.
Yeah. And you can tell the doctor's like, okay. gonna make a note here.
Hmm.
And then Dean's like, doctor, it's not my brother's fault. He didn't start the apocalypse. It was really this demon named Ruby. She had him drinking demon blood. My brother's not evil. He was just high.
And the way he delivered that line, like, he's not evil. He's just high. Like, just it's there's no problem with that, man. He's an okay guy.
It's totally
Um,
understandable.
I loved the way they played this. I mean, the fact that like at first Dean was kind of playing the straight man. He's like, yeah, my brother's crazy. He's a paranoid schizophrenic. He needs some help, and then you get the realization, oh, actually, they're going for both of them in the hospital.
and
It was so
the
great.
way it was done was really clever. It was like, Dean talking about himself like there's no problem here. He's not a patient at all, but
Yeah.
going right into this crazy story. Um, so after Dean says that, the doctor he kind of holds up his finger like 1 second, and then he picks up the phone to call his secretary, and he he cancels his lunch, which is funny. I didn't know lunch needed to be canceled, but
Right?
I thought he was gonna say like cancel all of my appointments for the day or something like that, but he's like cancel my lunch.
Right. It's just gonna take an hour to admit these guys. That's all.
Right. And I have my lunch scheduled on my calendar, so can you please cancel it? Pretty funny.
Another thing though is that why do they think, and I guess it's working or whatever, right? But why is it okay for them to pose as Edward Van Halen and Alex Van Halen? Like, who has names like that?
Nobody.
Like, even okay, like the full name wouldn't register to me as like the real names of these band members, but like even if I heard Van Halen, I would be like, that's a weird name. And also I've heard of this band. Like, that's not real.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I probably would be like, you made up that name. Who are you?
Yeah. Like, how do they know this doctor isn't like an actual badass? He totally knows.
Right. He's like, Van Halen's my favorite band. Who the fuck are you?
And then jumps on his like big motorcycle as he leaves for work.
Right, right. He puts on his sweater vest and his helmet and drives away. So, so the doctor cancels lunch. He's going to check him out. And then they're walking down a hallway with a nurse, and she's going to get them both checked in. And she's really weird with Dean. She calls him Sugar. And then there's like a little examination room, and she's in there with Sam, and she tells him to pull down his pants. And he's like, what? Why? And he looks over at her, and she's pulling this rubber glove on and snaps it.
Oh, God.
He's like,
yeah.
Okay. So then once Sam and Dean get back to each other, they're all checked in. They're in scrubs, like a little robe. And they both look really uncomfortable, like they had something shoved up their butts. And so they start talking, and Dean's kind of like, why are we doing this again? So we get a little exposition. I love the exposition segment of the episode where we find out what they're doing and why.
Yeah.
So Sam's like, this is the least we could do for Martin. He's a great hunter. And Dean's like, he was until Albuquerque. And Sam's still like, well, this is just a job. It's something we still need to look into, and I think it's good if we stay busy. And then Sam tells Dean that he thinks he basically tells him like, you've been keeping your feelings like bottled up. Like, come on, something's going on with you. And you've been like this ever since Ellen and Joe's deaths. And then predictably, Dean gets defensive. And he's like, no, I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then he looks over and sees Martin, and he's like, let's go over and talk to him. And he's so cute. I love Martin. Yes, he walks up to them.
I love
or they
him
walk
too.
up to. He's just so sweet. And he sees them. He's like, oh, Sam, Dean, hey. And he gets up and like hugs them, and he's like, oh, you boys got big. Wow, you look good. He's just so nice.
Yeah, he is. And I just like imagined, the last time he saw them, they were like maybe kids or like just much younger or something, like it's very sweet.
Like I really wanted to be Martin's friend.
I thought though, like the whole like the interaction between Sam and Dean was very interesting. I'm surprised that it's actually Sam who is like, no, we have to keep on going. We have to keep on hunting. Because usually it's Dean who's like, I don't need to work through my feelings right now. Like we need to keep on hunting. It's usually his reaction. And of course he is like keeping his emotions away. But it's understandable. I feel like it's understandable that he's like struggling with Ellen and Joe's deaths.
Totally. Why wouldn't he be?
Right. Sam, I don't know that we really saw much from him there. Like how is he dealing with it? Has he moved on, or is he just dealing with it in a more healthy way? quote unquote, like because everybody deals with grief differently, right? So I it's just I don't know, it's very interesting that they've gone the way they have.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because if I had to guess how they were both doing right now, I would think that they were both emotionally they would be doing pretty poorly because of Ellen and Joe dying. Like, and that that includes Sam. Like, I would think that they would both just be like, "This is terrible,"
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
really feeling it.
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, it is interesting. Sam kind of wants to, I don't know, kumbaya and like talk about their feelings and like figure it out, but also like what's your problem? Like let's just keep doing what we need to do.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, then they talk to Martin. He's the sweetest guy ever. And they sit down to talk to him. And Martin tells Sam and Dean that he doesn't know what the monster is. But the hospital has had 5 deaths in 4 months, and they keep calling it suicide, but they're wrong. He says, I know you boys think I'm a bag of loose screws, but I wouldn't have called you here if I didn't know there was something going on. And they're like, we believe you, let's figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So then the doctor, the guy from the opening scenes, comes over and he asks Sam and Martin to join them for group therapy. But then he tells
Mm-hmm.
Dean that he's going to the afternoon session, a different session. And Dean's like looking really upset and confused. And he's like, why? And the doctor's like, honestly, I have to say that your relationship with Sam is dangerously codependent. And they're like, okay, bye.
Yeah, and they like give each other like a little wave, like at the end of Super Bad.
Yeah, bye.
I loved it.
Yeah, they're pretty cute. And so then we cut to the group session, and one of the patients starts asking about the monster. And the doctor's like, we're not going to talk about that. And he's like, we have to because we're dying. This is, something is happening here, and we need to figure it out and talk about this. And the doctor keeps shutting it down. Um, and he says again, there is no monster. And Sam looks at him like, what? How do you know? So he and Martin are kind of exchanging looks this whole time because the patient is like, no, there is a monster. I've seen it. And they're like, what? Okay, that's good because Martin has not seen it. Nobody knows what it looks like. So we need to talk to this guy. Um, and then we cut over to it was funny because I didn't really realize what was happening here until I had to take notes about it, and I caught this. But Dean is playing checkers by himself, but he says "King me" like it's chess.
Yeah.
That's the wrong game.
We had a lot of like really adorable Dean moments in this episode.
Yeah.
Truly.
That was really cute because he like laughs to himself. He's like, haha, I'm so funny. So then this pretty new doctor comes up and introduces herself to Dean. And he's like, oh, you're my shrink? Lucky me. And she's like, yeah, you're my, and like looks at his file. Paranoid, schizophrenic, narcissistic personality disorder with religious psychosis. Lucky me.
Yeah, that shuts him down right away because like he had said that in such a like flirtatious way, even
Oh,
though
yeah.
he's,
With a cute
you
little
know,
smile.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
so
it would have
interesting
gotten him.
that even though it's his I don't know, like his mental image, like this person is not real, we find out later on, right?
Right.
But she's still like not taking his flirtatious advances. Like,
That's so true. He gets shut down in his fantasies.
yeah,
It's
that's
just
part of it, right? That's
sad.
the push and pull, cat chasing after a mouse. He loves that.
The chase. I too love the
Hmm.
chase. I understand. Oh, that's funny though. So, they're both like, I've got questions for you. And she's like, well, I've got questions for you too. So let's talk. And then he goes, quid pro quo, Clarice, and does the like,
I'm
mouth
so mad at
thing.
myself. I had meant to cut that part and
Uh-huh.
play it because I love it so much. He does such a good job.
Yeah, he must have had to practice. Like, it's so ridiculous.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, it was really funny. Um, and she's like, okay, Hannibal. And then they have a very interesting conversation. It's really quick and goes back and forth. It's kind of like, um, I don't know, like really, it's just kind of witty, like banter back and forth, but also meaningful. Um,
Yeah, very open to
uh-huh.
like
Like she
just it
starts asking
just
like serious things.
oh yeah. And it opens up all of his vulnerabilities like in a few seconds basically. It's great.
Yeah, I agree. Because he's, kind of one track mind and not holding back the story of him being a hunter and, starting the apocalypse and all of that. So he's asking her questions about, like, have you seen anything weird going on in the hospital? Um, have you found any cold spots or anything like that? And so then when it's her turn to ask questions, she's like, let's talk about your father. Or she says, what is your longest relationship? And he says 2 months. So we find out that Dean's never been in a relationship that was longer than 2 months.
That's insane. This man is like,
Yes.
I don't know, he's got to be like about 29
30.
now, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like he's about that age at this point in his life. And he's never had a long-term relationship where I don't know, 2 months, that's for me even a short-term relationship like I would think, you
Oh,
know?
for me, that's like a fling.
Yeah, exactly. Like
I'm a
that's
long-term
crazy.
relationship kind of person. 2 months is like, we tried dating. It didn't really work. It wasn't even really a relationship.
Exactly. And so I was surprised that it wasn't even with like that girl from Route 666. I forgot her name, but it had
Oh
sounded like
yeah.
she and
Like
him
they had
had
a
been together for a
history.
while. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's
True.
very surprising.
She was his 2 month relationship and it was really meaningful.
Yeah.
God. Yeah, so that's sad. Um but also, I mean, if you're just like that kind of person, I'm not going to judge you. Do whatever the fuck you want, but it seems like it's sad for him because it seems like that's what like he secretly does want a long relationship. He wants long-term stable love
Hmm.
and he just doesn't have that. So, anyway.
And also, he had completely admits to drinking a lot,
Oh,
like a
yeah.
lot.
Yep.
Like, what does he say?
I mean,
Like 50 drinks a week or something like that?
yeah, and I didn't really know like if he was fucking with her or not because she also said like when do you sleep? And he was like
Mm-hmm.
it was like 3 hours or something. It was like a really short period of time every night or like
Yeah.
certain days a week. It
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, maybe like 4 hours, 4 days a week or something like that." And I was like, "What the fuck?" And then when she asks him how much he drinks, he says, "Well, I have to sleep sometime." So he's basically saying like when I'm not sleeping, I'm drinking.
Oh, I took that to mean he drinks to sleep.
Yeah, it could also go that way. I wasn't really sure what he had meant. So
Yeah,
either way, it's fucked up.
it is. It definitely is. Yeah. Man.
uh, yeah, so he's a mess. Um, so that's the kind of conversation they have, and what really gets him is when it's her turn to ask a question again, and she says, "Let's talk about your father." And then we see his face, and he just looks very serious, and it's like, "Oh God." Then we cut to Dean walking down the hallway, and he runs into Sam, and they get a chance to talk for a second. And Dean looks awful. And this is where he tells Sam, because Sam's like, "Whoa, are you okay?" And he's like, "I just got thraped."
Ugh.
So is that like therapy raped?
Yes. Like I guess what he's trying to say is he went into that conversation with his with barriers basically.
Uh-huh.
He did not want to like actually release out any information or any emotion,
Right.
but she was able to go past that barrier and actually like get him to feel something and to
Open up.
so like yeah, and open up. And so I understand what he's saying. I don't
Sure.
like that he said it that way.
No, yeah.
And
It's kind of not cool.
it's not, yeah. I mean, maybe again, like maybe in 2009 it would have been funny, but it's not now, and so maybe it's just a product of its time, you know?
I don't know. I mean, I think jokes like that are clearly written by people who have zero experience themselves or like with anybody close to them who has experienced anything like that. It's not funny if you have any experience with it. It's like really fucking not funny. So, while thankfully I do not personally have any experience with that, I do know others who have. And so I hear something like that and I'm like, was that a joke? You know? Was that
Yeah.
supposed to be funny? Because it's not. And
Yeah.
I get what you're trying to say too. Like I know what it's supposed to mean, but there's another way that you can get that across without being completely insensitive to like horrible situations that
Other people's experiences, yeah.
right. So yeah, that's how I feel about that.
Agreed.
Um, poor choice of words there. And of all of the
Mhm.
new words you could make up, I don't know. Whatever. So, yeah, but poor Dean's obviously, because of that, we can tell he's had a hard time in therapy. Um, and that makes sense. He doesn't open up. If they've talked about John, even if it was in his head, I'm sure that was a really difficult conversation for him to have. And maybe
Yeah.
it was good. I mean, I don't know. He needs a therapist,
That he
even if it's in his head.
Oh, he definitely needs a therapist. They both do,
Yeah.
really. So I mean, even though like they're I don't know, there's a version of this episode that does mental health well
Uh-huh.
and does therapy very well, like they both do need to go to therapy, and I wish we would have seen more of that, because we,
Yeah.
we got to see it with Dean, and I for the most part really enjoyed that scene, because I loved that we were able to kind of dig deeper into his issues, and he was kind of able to realize some stuff, hopefully.
Yeah.
um we didn't really get, well, no, that's not true. Like, we do get to see Sam come to a realization later on, and that I
Mm.
really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so, I think the outcome of all of this is done well, but just the journey there is a little rocky because of moments like that,
Yeah.
where they say that, or they're kind of making a joke of mental health and all of that, but they're not really showing that mental health affects a lot of people. You don't have to be locked up into a psychiatric ward to be, to have um, moments of poor mental health, or, struggle with your mental health. And so I would have loved to have seen like a woke version of this episode, essentially.
Me too. Yeah, because it has good intentions. Um yeah, I would have liked to see that too because there is a good way that they could have done all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Um so when Sam and Dean are talking, after Dean tells him that, and he's kind of like, what's going on? Sam tells him about how group therapy went and the patient who has apparently seen the monster. And they're like, okay, well, we need to talk to him. So they plan to meet up in an hour and go find him. And Dean clearly wants to leave like ASAP. He's like, okay, because the sooner we get out of here, the better. But he turns around and mid sentence, this woman is standing behind him and she like grabs him and just like looks at him in the face and starts kissing him.
Oh,
And Sam's like, what? And so they like kiss for a minute. And break apart and she says, "Hi, I'm Wendy." And then she leaves and slaps his ass and walks away. And then
I
another issue. Uh
uh-huh. Oh,
Dean's
yes,
like
yes, yes.
looking after her, like, wow, that was kind of awesome.
Uh-huh.
And Sam's like, you cannot hit that. And Dean's like, oh, I'm so torn.
He's torn? Question mark. What? Come on, Dean, you know better.
Yeah, you can't.
Yes, I had a lot
You
of
can't.
problems with that as well. I did.
So, that's kind of
Um,
goofy. And I also, it was just kind of a weird scene because I had no fucking idea what was happening. It was like, is this a ghost? Is this the monster? Is this a patient? Is this in his head? What is happening here? Is Sam able to see this? Like,
mhm,
I don't know what's happening.
mhm. Yeah, it was almost like it was not necessary
It's almost
to
like
the
it was not
episode.
necessary.
It's almost like we did not need that.
Yeah. Mhm.
I have a lot of problems with it because it's oh god, I don't even know if I can fully verbalize like how I feel about it all.
Yeah.
Um she was I don't know, I just didn't like how she was used as a prop. We're supposed to believe that she has some sort of mental health disorder where she's just going up to multiple people and kissing them
Mhm.
and maybe it's perhaps based off of a real mental health disorder and maybe that people who have that wouldn't really appreciate it being exaggerated in such a way and made fun of in such a way on an episode, a TV episode. And so I don't know. I just really did not like that.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for verbalizing that. I think that's why I didn't like it either. Um Yeah, not necessary. So, okay, we'll move on. Um anyway, so they keep going to go talk to the guy who saw the monster. And on the way to his room, they hear him screaming from inside his room. They get to the room and they see his feet kicking the door. There's like the little window in the door, and his feet are like hitting
Oh,
the
yeah.
window. And Sam and Dean are trying desperately to Jimmy open the door, and Sam's trying to pick the lock, and Dean's yelling at him to hurry up. And Sam, like, really angrily, like, hugely yells at him, "Back off, Dean." And we're like, oh,
Yeah, he
whoa.
does.
Shit.
Crazy. Uh-huh.
And Dean's like, okay, fuck. And then he gets the door open, but the screaming had stopped before he gets the door open, and they open it up, and the man is hanging from a pipe by his neck.
Mhm.
Um, but
Yeah,
also,
his anger comes out of nowhere.
yeah, he's like really pissed off in like 0.2 seconds. And then also, just as far as this guy dying, he was kicking and screaming seconds ago. Get him down. He's probably still alive. I mean, maybe not because
That's
of the monster, because
true.
it's supposed to look like a suicide, but if he had just been hung, he would definitely still be alive, unless his neck was broken or something like that.
Yeah, that's very
I'm just
true.
saying.
Um, you're right.
So,
But
yeah, that's sad.
it I had kind of wished that we would have seen Sam in that therapy session because I and now we kind of know like where this anger came from. It was just, it was already there, right? It was just
Mm-hmm.
heightened. So maybe if he wouldn't have been affected by the wraith, he would have felt this anger. Perhaps if Dean was like, hurry up. But he wouldn't have actually verbalized it at
Mm-hmm.
all in outside of the hospital or outside of like the wraith's uh powers. So I did really like that moment. And I love everything with Sam in this
Yeah.
episode and with Dean, both of their character developments, but it's very interesting to see Sam get like
Yeah.
that.
Just explosive anger that comes out of nowhere. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it happens a couple times in this episode. We see it. So I liked how they did that too. It was like a build up to like what we come to understand at the end. Yeah, it was good. So then somehow Sam and Dean sneak into the morgue or whatever that's at the psychiatric hospital. And they are checking out the guy's body. But this is weird. Like, I have to assume it was like another day because I don't know. This guy was hung in his
Yeah,
room. They would have had to like exit, and other people would have had to find him. And then they like, process the whole thing. And anyway,
that's true.
so we'll just say next night or something. Um, they're in the morgue. And so they're checking out the body, and Sam is feeling around the guy's head and like where the mark was where he was hung, and feels around to the back of his neck, and there's a hole in the side of his neck. And so Sam reaches over and grabs one of those like really long cotton swabs that are only at the doctor's office. And yeah,
Ugh,
and sticks it into the hole, and it just keeps going and keeps going. It's
it's so
super
gross.
disgusting. And he's like, this hole goes all the way through his brain. And we were like, ew. Uh,
Yeah.
and then they look over and they're like, should we check it out? And they see a small bone saw. And Dean's like, really? Sam's like, yep. So Dean goes outside of the morgue into the hallway to keep watch. And we hear this like really loud saw come on. And he's like looking around like, oh God. um, so then with Sam, he takes off the top of this guy's head and pulls out something big and
Mhm.
black. It looks like a black mushroom cap.
It looks like hamburger meat.
Yeah, or like a burned
It looks like a
burger patty.
yes. It's
Gross.
gross. Uh-huh.
And then outside, Dean hears somebody coming, and so he goes back inside to warn Sam. And Sam's like, "Look, this guy's brain was sucked dry." Ugh. And Dean's like, "Okay, that's nice. There's somebody coming." And so he like very quickly like gets this guy closed up and puts him back into the drawer, and he takes off the bloody gloves and like uh shoots them like a basketball into the trash can right as the nurse opens up the door, and she's like, what are you guys doing? It's really cute how she just talks to them like children.
Yeah.
And Sam just kind of like smiles and laughs like, I don't know. And then Dean just pulls his pants down, throws his arms up in the air, and says, "Pudding."
Oh my god, I do love that so much. And actually by happy accident, so I got the clip of him saying that, but by accident I like messed up the recording, so there's like an echo behind it and it sounds so insane. Let me play it.
Okay, awesome.
Pudding!
Sounds like it's
Pudding!
Like I don't know what I did, but
it's awesome. It really sounds like someone's like saying it over a megaphone in a stadium.
yes. Yeah, just like, hey.
Pudding!
Oh man, that's funny.
And just the extra like just the fact that he like dropped his pants and like he's basically displaying his penis to her like, hey, this is my pudding.
Oh
It's
man.
so great.
It was a creative
It's
solution to the problem.
gifable.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It was definitely a Dean solution. Like Sam can't think on his feet, man. He was just like looking around like I don't know. I don't know what we're doing here.
He's the worst.
Yeah. Where would we be in this moment without Dean?
Fucked. That's where we would be. Yeah, so that was one of the best moments of the episode for sure. So then we cut over to okay, well after that the nurse is like, okay, come on, time to go back to bed. And just like leads them out. So then the next day, Dean's looking at some clown paintings that are on the wall, and he's like, "What are these, original Gacy's?" And Martin's like, "I painted those."
Yeah, like so like sad. Like, don't you like them?
No, Martin, they're creepy, and you're like John Wayne Gacy. And then they start talking about the monster again, and Martin. This is a little weird because it seems like Dad's journal, right? I don't know what they're looking at. Is this like a journal Martin
What?
has,
How did they get
or is
Dad's?
it John's?
I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if it was Martin's or John's Hunter journal. But how did they get that in there?
Yeah, it would have
I
definitely
assumed maybe
been like locked away,
Yeah.
right, with all their possessions or something somewhere.
I would think so. So maybe it was Martin's, something that he had constructed while they were there. But it seemed like Sam and Dean were the ones handling it.
Yeah.
Like they had turned to the page of the Wraith.
Mhm.
So I don't know.
I don't know either. I'm not sure where that came from. But they're looking at this like hand-drawn image that's supposed to be a wraith, and Martin tells them that that's what they're up against. It feeds on brain juice, and he tells them that you can kill it with silver. That's the good news. But the bad news is that it can also pass as a human, so it could be anybody. And they're like, well, how do we find it? And Martin says that lore tells them that its true form will be shown in a mirror. So they have to try and find it through looking in the mirrors. So then we cut to Dean like leaning on a corner in the hallway, and he's looking up at like one of those distorted kind of bubble mirrors that you put up in the corner of a hallway to see around corners. And he's just staked out there, just checking out everybody in the room, whoever's walking by to see if they show themselves as a wraith. And his pretty doctor comes over and starts talking to him. And she's like, "What are you doing?" And he tells her basically that he's hunting and like opens up about that again. And, that it's all on him. Like he has to save the world. She's like, do you have to, who are you trying to save? And he's like, everybody. We have to try and save the world basically. And she's like, wow, feeling like you have to save everyone. That's a crushing weight. She's like, how do you get up in the morning? And it's this really like serious moment because he's like, you can tell he's thinking, I don't fucking know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then the male doctor.
It's funny.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's funny though because I know upon the first watch and I had even forgotten, like I wasn't sure if it was the nurse or the doctor, and in this moment I thought, oh, it's definitely the doctor. Like she now knows that Dean is looking for the wraith, and maybe their intel about how to spot a wraith is incorrect or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought this was supposed to be like a misleading direction for us, that it was actually the doctor and she wasn't actually normal.
Totally. Yeah, and up until that point I had thought that it was the male doctor, the guy who's running the hospital.
Oh yeah.
Cuz he had been so like adamant that there was no monster to the point where you're like, dude, you're the monster. Okay.
Yeah. That's true.
But yeah, when she comes over and starts talking about this, I wondered about it too. Because she just seemed a little too in the know. I don't know. So then they're just standing there, still talking about that, and the male doctor walks by and says hi, and Dean happens to look up and he sees that doctor in wraith form walking by in the mirror, and then he just keeps walking down the hallway, and Dean's like, what the fuck?
And you watching the episode, you're like, I knew it.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I knew it. Called it. So then that night, Sam and Dean meet up with Martin, and Sam's like, I had to go to 3 nurses' stations to find these. But he pulls out some silver-plated, I think they're letter openers. And because at first I thought it was a nail file, but it's bigger than that. So I think it's a letter opener.
Yeah.
And so he passes them out to Martin and Dean, And then Wendy walks by or comes up to them, and Dean's like, oh no, I don't have time for that right now. But she goes straight past Dean, goes up to Sam, and starts kissing him instead. And this was kind of funny. She breaks away from him and she's like, I want him now. He's larger.
I did laugh at that.
I was like, I kind of get that.
Yeah.
I don't blame you.
But also, I really did appreciate, like, okay, if we're going to have this crazy thing happen, that's completely unnecessary. I did really appreciate that Sam did not kiss her back. Like, he's actively not kissing her back.
Yes. Mouth closed, standing there, doing nothing. Just.
Yes.
Yeah.
Such a gentleman.
Oh, Sam. So then she walks off, and Sam and Dean start talking to Martin again, and they get real with him, and they're like, we've got a lot to do. We need to get through all the guards and get to his office, and it's going to suck the whole way. And we really need your help. We need the backup. And Martin kind of breaks down, and he's like, no way, this is where he was like, I would do anything for you boys to help you, but I can't. And they're like, we know what happened in Albuquerque. And he's like, you don't know the half of it. So then I was like, what happened in Albuquerque?
Yeah.
Somebody tell me. So
I guess it's good that, like, we don't learn, like, it's left up to our imagination.
That's
and all
true.
that. But I'm curious to know, like, because we don't really know exactly what's wrong with Martin. Is he just, like, overly anxious now? Like, something happened to you develop an anxiety disorder, maybe?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was
I'm
assuming
guessing.
too. I don't really know, but that's a good guess.
But what would cause that in a hunter? You know what I mean? Like, they deal with all sorts of stuff all the time. So, like, what was it that really put him over the edge?
Right. What was it that was that bad? I don't know.
Yeah.
So he just says that he can't help, and they're like, okay. So then we see Sam and Dean breaking into the doctor's office, and he's gone, but his keys are on the table, on the desk. And so they're like, okay, he's out in the hospital somewhere hunting. So they split up and take separate wings of the hospital, and Sam finds the doctor first. But Sam sees him coming, like he just peeks around a corner, and he doesn't even have his his jacket on, his white coat. He's just walking down the hallway looking at a file or something, minding his own business. And Sam busts out from behind the wall and starts fighting with the doctor. And then he slashes his arm, and two orderlies come out and start fighting Sam, and he just totally overpowers them. This fight is bonkers because he's just like, nope, fuck you. Just like takes them down.
I thought he was going to kill them.
It was really intense.
Well, and he's so brutal. Like, you really, Wendy is correct. He is larger. So he looked, but it's funny because, like, he's a really big guy, but he's such a puppy, like we see him as very sweet and everything, even though, he was drinking demon blood and all that shit.
That's fine.
But in this moment, he seems very scary.
Yeah.
Like, he is really exhibiting his large physique and his strength in a way that I don't think we've seen in Sam before.
Yeah.
And so it's actually very frightening.
And I was thinking while watching the scene, like, those orderlies, even though they're big guys too, why do I feel like they would never be able to take Sam? Like, he's too much for them. He's completely too much for anybody in this hospital. If he decides to go off, he could take on anybody.
Yeah.
It was just really, just kind of like unbridled, like, rage. And so he takes them both down and gets back over to the doctor and pins him to the ground. And he's about to stab him and kill him. But Martin comes up and pulls back Sam's arm. And he's like, no, don't. Look at the cut on his arm. It's not burning. Because Martin had told them, like, if you use the silver on them, that their skin, like, crackles and burns. Like, that's what's supposed to happen. And it wasn't. It was just a cut.
Sam, who's like so caught up in his emotions, didn't even notice.
He didn't even look.
And didn't even
No.
stop. Yeah. To check.
And that was the first thing I thought was going to
Crazy.
happen because he scratched him and I was like, okay, check it out. You know, look at it. Is it burning or is something happening? He didn't even
Right.
check. Yeah, so he was about to kill him. And so he stopped, and then we cut to Dean visiting Sam, who's like locked in his... I don't know how Dean's able to get in there, but whatever. He goes into Sam's room, and Sam is under heavy sedation. And I really like this.
Yes, he is.
This was one of the really funny moments of the episode because the way Jared plays this scene is so funny. It's fucking hilarious.
I have to say, I don't think I still don't think that I like drunk Sam. But I did enjoy like what was written for him to say, you know?
Mm-hmm. You know, it's funny. I don't like drunk Sam, but this is a different Sam because he's under some like heavy medication, and I'm cool with this Sam. He's
That's true.
funny. He's not, you know, like weepy and ridiculous like he gets when he's drunk. He's not annoying. It was just very funny.
Yeah.
And and he's talking to Dean like this. He's just really, you know, it's just everything is like awesome.
Yeah, he sounds like a 14-year-old who like smoked pot for the first time or something.
Yeah, who just got fucking stoned.
Or like he smoked he thought he like inhaled correctly, but he didn't actually, so he's not actually stoned, he's just faking it.
Everything is so awesome.
Do you see that blue light right there? Oh, it's actually there.
Shut the fuck up. Yeah, that's about right. So they're having this really hilarious conversation, and Dean's like, okay, have fun, I'll see you later. But it was interesting in this conversation because Sam, what is it that they talk about where Dean says that he saw or he has to do something, and Sam's like, well, you know, maybe you really did see that because, or it's all in your head because you're actually crazy, and this is, you know, you're supposed to be in here. I mean, we're in this hospital. You should just, you know, go with it. So he's already putting this idea in Dean's head that he's crazy. And it seems like it kind of hits Dean, which was interesting. Like or at least I hadn't really thought about the fact that that could be a fear of Dean's, but it seems like it is.
Yeah.
And he really doesn't want to talk about it with Sam. So he's like, okay, I gotta go. So outside, Dean runs into his doctor, the woman, and she's like, you missed our session this afternoon. And so she starts talking to him, and he basically tells her, like, I'm still hunting. I'm busy. That's why I didn't come to the session. People are dying. I've got shit to do. And she's like, you can't save everyone. Hell, these days, you can't save anyone. And we were like, what? What'd you say? She's like, you got Ellen and Joe killed. You shot Lucifer, but you couldn't gank him. And she starts running down the list of all of these things that he couldn't do. And he's looking at her like,
how do you
what
know
the
this?
fuck? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She says, did you really think that Dean Winchester with a GED and a give him hell attitude was going to beat the devil?
Oh, man. When she
Damn.
said that, I was like, "Oh, come on!" But this is Dean. This is Dean's mind, right? Like
and that's why
this
it was
is
so
him.
confusing for me because nobody else knew that he said that. He only
Yeah.
said that to like Bobby and Sam.
That's true. Yeah.
No one else heard him say that. So then it's like, what? This was like the moment in Harry Potter where Harry's at the very end of book 4 with Mad-Eye Moody, but it's not Mad-Eye Moody. And he's like talking to Harry after he comes out of the graveyard, and he's like, what does he say?
I think he's like, at the graveyard, were they all there?
Yes, were there others in the graveyard? And he was like, I never said anything about a graveyard, Professor. Oh,
Boom.
shit!
Stupid Crouch. Come on, get it together. Get it together. He was too excited in that moment.
Yep.
Yeah, fucked up.
It's crazy. I love that part.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, fuck. So yeah, he's looking at her like, what the fuck are you? And she says, the world is going to burn and there's nothing you can do about it. And so then he starts yelling at her and he's like, who are you? And there's this orderly who's standing at like down the hallway and he's like, hey, you need to calm down. And he's like, tell her to calm down. And he's like, who? And he's like, what do you mean? She's right there. And he's like, sir, there's nobody there. And so then we see Dean just standing there by himself.
That was creepy. Like, I actually like got a little bit of chills in that moment because it was like, what? Like, imagine like you think you're talking to somebody and they're not actually there.
And someone's like, there's nobody there.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah, it freaks me out.
I had this brief moment. I think it was either the night before or last night where I was up in the middle of the night. I was feeding, my baby, and I don't know if I was dozing off or like I just haven't gotten a lot of sleep, and I could have sworn that I was talking to my husband, that he was like talking to me, and like I like look back at him to like talk back to him, and then I realized like he's asleep. Like, what the hell? Didn't I just see him talking to me?
Weird.
But I think it's just I haven't gotten a lot of sleep, guys. Like, that's just but it was like this moment where it was like, wait, like, wasn't I talking to him?
It's so weird.
I could have sworn I saw him talking to me, and awake. Like,
I feel like your sleepy brain is really weird. Because I'll have moments too, like this has happened a few times, more than a few times to me throughout my life, where I'm kind of like, I guess I'm in between awake and asleep, like falling asleep. And I'll hear somebody say something that sounds like they've spoken it to me. There is someone in front of me speaking this word. They're right next to me, and I wake up and there's nobody there.
Ugh,
it's very weird. Like at one of the last times that happened, it was my mom, and I heard her say my name. I think was like Chris, and I just woke up.
Yeah,
and it was so real. It was so real. I was like, what?
Yeah. No, yeah.
It's really strange.
Because I'll have moments like that where like I'll be half asleep and for some reason I think I'm in the middle of a conversation and I'll say something out loud. Like I will really say it. Yeah. And my husband's like, who's still awake, will be like, what? Like, what are you saying? And when I actually wake up, I realize like, okay, that didn't make any sense. But a minute ago, it made complete sense to me.
Yeah, but it made perfect sense because that was in the conversation that I was having.
Right, exactly. But this was weird because I saw something visual. Like I specifically thought I saw him awake. And the next moment weird. He was completely asleep. So it's just I totally felt Dean in this moment.
Yeah, your brain was fucking with you.
Oh yeah, that's what happens when you don't get a lot of sleep.
Oh God. You're just like, don't like soldiers and like people in the Navy on boats and, all these people who have to deal with situations where you have this like extreme lack of sleep. That's where you're at right now.
Yeah. Yes, that is.
You're in this like grueling regimen with no sleep. Oh, man. So Dean's having this realization. There's nobody there, but he's looking at the doctor and she's still standing in front of him. And she says that she's not real. She's like, I'm not real. I'm in your head because you're going crazy. And then shit really gets weird. He walks down the hallway away from her and starts seeing everybody he passes in mirrors as the Wraith.
Yeah.
And then he kind of starts hallucinating. It seems like things are kind of spinning. And he starts freaking the fuck out and having an episode and tries to open a door to go through this door, and he can't open it. And so he just like sinks down onto the floor and is like looking around like, what the fuck is happening? Just has a
And the
total meltdown.
Yeah, and the music in this moment was really cool too. It was very theatrical, it felt like a horror movie almost, you know.
Oh,
It was very
yeah,
different from the rest of the episode.
that's cool. So then we cut to Sam talking to, he's in his room, like locked up, and he's not sedated anymore. And the male doctor comes and visits him, and with a couple of orderlies, just in case. And he's like, I heard that you wanted to see me. And Sam thanks him and apologizes. He's like, I didn't ever mean to hurt you. And I understand now that there is no such thing as monsters. And I hope you'll give me another chance. And so the doctor tells him, you'll be allowed to go to the day room. But if anything like this happens again, I'm going to have to transfer you to another facility that handles violent patients. And Sam's like, okay, thank you. He's like really sheepish. And it's also kind of scary because the doctor tells him, at this other facility, they will be far, far less forgiving. And it's like, oh, is it
Yeah.
really horrible for people who have to live there? It's sad.
And it's very threatening.
Uh-huh. Yeah, very threatening. So then Sam goes to the day room and sees Dean sitting at a table, and Dean immediately starts attacking him. And he's like, it was never the demon blood. It was you. The lies, the running around with Ruby, everything, it was all you. And then everyone in the room comes up and starts surrounding Sam and telling him, you killed us. You've ruined everything. You've killed us. And so then Sam flips the fuck out and just starts swinging. Just starts punching people. And then the scene changes and we see that he's just swinging at thin air. There's nothing there and he's just having an episode.
Yeah.
And Dean isn't even where he was in Sam's head. He's like sitting in a corner, cowering, sitting at this table, like not knowing what the fuck is happening. And so then these orderlies come and wrangle Sam and take him away. And so Dean is sitting there in that corner, and we close in on him, and he's really quietly to himself. He just says like, what is happening? So then he makes his way to go visit Martin in his room in the middle of the night, and he tells Martin that both he and Sam are going crazy, and he feels like they've somehow been like poisoned or something's happened to them to make this happen. And so Martin kind of talks him through. This is a funny scene too, because Dean's like, kind of like fending off like shadow people. And Martin says something about a monster, and Dean like flips out and turns around, and he's like, where? He's like, no. There's not a monster here. It's fine. So Martin walks him through, what's happened and helps him figure out what's going on. And Dean's like, we must have been shot up with something, or maybe it was transferred through saliva. It's Wendy.
I mean, it's good deduction, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
It was solid reasoning. She kissed both Sam and Dean, but not Martin. So, there you go. So Martin and Dean go to see Wendy, and outside her room, they hear her screaming. So they run. But on the way to Wendy's room, Dean can't step on the cracks. So he's only stepping on specific tiles and
Yeah.
looking absolutely ridiculous.
Yes.
So then they get to her room, and they open it up, and they see the nurse from the beginning sitting over Wendy on her bed, and Wendy's wrists have been slit. And the nurse has this kind of like spear, this little talon thing that comes out from her wrist. and it's in Wendy's
Yeah.
head, and she retracts it and pulls it back into her arm, and it's super gross.
I really enjoy like the effect of it because it also like looks very veiny
Mm-hmm.
almost.
Mm.
Like it just looks gross. It's a really gross thing coming out of her arm. So
Uh-huh.
it's pretty cool.
And then I forgot to. She pulls it out and like holds it in the air and licks it, and then it retracts into her arm.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
no.
so gross. So this is kind of funny too. Like on the Netflix episode, like that's where it cuts off, and she's like, oh, she sees Dean again, and she says, "Hey, sugar," and then it cuts to commercial, and then we come back from commercial, and they're fighting. there's no transition into the fight. They're just already fighting. So
It's so funny that
everybody's
like
like
a show that
punching each other.
We're living in a Netflix world now and it just does not work.
Yeah, it's weird. Okay, back from commercial, fighting. So she takes down both Martin and Dean, but Martin gets back up and he has his silver-plated letter opener, and he slashes her hand, and it starts to burn and crackle. And she runs away and closes the door behind her. And Martin goes over to Wendy and sees that she's still alive. And so then outside, the nurse is running down the hallway, and, you know, she still looks like a nurse to everybody else. And so she's like, there are 2 patients in Wendy's room and they attacked me. And these orderlies run off to go see what's happening. And so she runs off, and then the orderlies run into Wendy's room. And but right before that, okay, so Martin and Dean, while they're still in the room, Martin's like kind of grappling with the orderlies, and he tells Dean to go and kill the Wraith, but he's got some crazy visuals going on right now. It's not a good situation. He's hallucinating really hard and just totally flipping out, and he's like, I can't do it. And Martin's like, you don't have a choice. And he's just really sweet about it. And so Martin lunges at both orderlies and takes them down so that Dean can escape. And Dean struggles out of the room, and there's a trail of blood that the nurse has left behind, so he follows that to where she is. She goes into Sam's padded cell. He's in, after his second episode, I guess they put him in here. He's got like cuffs on his wrists and his ankles, and he's in this padded cell. And she goes in there and acts normal at first, like she's still just the nurse. But then she reveals herself as the Wraith, and Sam asks her like if she made them crazy, and she's like, I helped. And so she explains that basically she just kind of cranks up what was already there. So she just like heightens all
and
of
that
the
makes
things.
a lot of sense. Yeah, because they're not saying anything that is out of character for them, you know?
Right. Yeah. It just is built on what their fears already are. And yeah, it does make sense.
Yeah, and she says, you build your own hell, I just give you the Legos, which I liked that.
That's pretty good. It's also pretty unsettling, right? It's like, oh man, they already have all of these issues, and it didn't take much to set them off like this. And it's, you know, it originates from their own brains already.
Yeah.
So let me see. I lost my place. So she's telling Sam that she just, you know, cranks up what's already there, and that basically all of that anger and that rage that Sam has, she's like, that's all you. I didn't do that. And then Dean busts into the room with his letter opener, and he's still not good. He's not in a good place, but he's like, hey, I'm crazy, so I'm gonna fight you anyway, you know, bring it on. So then they start fighting, and she totally overpowers him and slams him up against the wall. and extends her like talon thing, and she's like pointing it at Dean's head, and it's like about to go into his brain, and he reaches up and grabs it with his hand and snaps it off.
And his face when he does this. Yeah.
Like all grossed out.
Oh man.
It's pretty nasty. And it starts spurting blood, and she screams and lets go of him. And so he grabs the letter opener and stabs her in the chest, and she dies. It works really well. It just kind of, it sounds like it burns a little bit, but it just, she has nothing after that, and she just crumples to the floor. And so then we see like the room from Dean's perspective, and he like shakes his head, and then his vision clears and everything seems like normal.
Yeah, that was
again.
interesting.
And Sam's like
because
yeah, like it only has that effect while she's alive.
Because I would think that it's not anything that's necessarily connected to her. You know, it's she like shot them up with a little bit of crazy, but I would think that would wear off on its own. You know, like
me too. Like it was more chemical.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So instead of like mystical or whatever, you know?
Right. Yeah. Why does it have to be connected to her being alive?
I guess just so he could actually drive instead of driving.
Right. So drunk. They could escape.
Basically.
Yeah. So Sam's like, do you still feel like crazy? And he's like, no, I feel fine. And so he starts to set Sam free, and then the alarm in the building goes off, and they're both like, oh shit. So they end up escaping. They're running across a dark lawn into the woods, and the Impala's waiting for them in the woods. It's been hidden out there. And on their way to the car, Sam stops, and he's like having a moment. He starts talking to Dean, and he's like, the Wraith was right. And Dean's like, no, she wasn't. But Sam's trying to explain to Dean, all of the things that he's done. And he's like, I'm angry all the time, and I don't know why. And I have always been angry. I was angry at Dad. I was angry at you, and then at Ruby, and I'm just angry all the time. And so, okay. So then Dean says, basically, bury your feelings deep down inside and forget about it.
Ugh.
Cool. Really solid advice there, Dean.
Yeah.
Is that what Dad told you to do too? What a really great way to deal with your feelings.
That's really going to help, Dean, as you've seen through the past few days. That works. Yeah. That really works.
Through your entire life.
Yeah.
Like this is literally what you've been doing the entire time. How has that worked for you so far?
It's ridiculous.
It just really bothered me. It was like, what? But is that really where you wanted to go with that? Sam is like reaching out for help here.
Yeah.
And you're telling him, buck up, son.
He doesn't need that right now. Like he's telling Dean that because he's really struggling with it, and because he's like asking for help, essentially.
He needs to talk about it.
How do I deal with this? How do I get past this? And Dean is like being completely unhelpful. And just because he doesn't want to deal with it, or he doesn't maybe want to deal with his own emotions, because that's maybe what's lined up next. He's just like, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah, we're not going there. We need to keep going. So, shove that way down deep and don't think about it again.
Yeah.
It's just so, I don't know. That feels to me like very typical, like advice you would get from your dad in the 40s or 50s.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like men who neither know how to feel, like deal with their feelings or talk about them, and are telling you to just like be a man.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. It's not helpful.
It's not. It really isn't.
So then Dean says that, and he's like, are you with me? And Sam's like about to cry, deaf, watery eyes. And he just says, I'm with you. And they get into the car and drive away. And that's the end of the episode. We don't see Martin again. Quick reminder.
Yeah, I did not realize that we had not seen Martin and didn't get any sort of um
Closure there.
catharsis, closure with him, a goodbye at least, a thank you.
Their friend? Come on. Nothing. I thought he was going to escape with them and be a hunter again. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be nice, but I guess he's choosing to stay there, very much like Ali Larder's character in Final Destination 2.
I don't know what that means, but it sounds like an awesome reference. So good job.
But I mean, I liked, we had a lot of problems with this episode, but I really like what it does. I really like that we're dealing with these emotions in a different way, and I thought it was very interesting that Sam, his issues are coming out in such a physical way, whereas Dean's are coming out in a more emotional way. So I loved how they showed the difference between what they're dealing with and just I wish we would have gotten a little bit more with Sam, perhaps, like as far as like why is this happening, but of course Dean shuts him down. So I don't know, like overall a lot of issues with it, but I do like a lot of moments.
Yeah, I agree. I like what it did too. You were talking earlier about the character development, and they did do that really well. There was a lot of progress there and just kind of like filling out some of the issues that like we kind of know that they're dealing with, but bringing more of an explanation to it and how they're handling it. And yeah, it was good. I liked that too.
I guess the only thing is I wish we would have had more of how they're dealing with Dean and Joe's Dean and Joe, how they're dealing with Ellen and Joe's death.
Sad. Yeah. They didn't talk about that again, except from, well, there was like, Sam's mention of it at the beginning, how Dean had been weird since then. And then his doctor in his head who was like, you got them killed. So there's clearly some guilt there, but I wanted to know more about how he felt about it.
Yeah, and they didn't really like work through any of that in this episode, and maybe they will in future episodes, but it just happened. It's like still fresh in our mind, and so I don't know. I don't want to forget about it so soon.
Yeah. No, because it was a really big deal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, agreed. So that's that. I have not looked at ranking before now. I don't know if you have.
I was trying to. I have no idea. Let me think. Let me look at this. It's going to be a lot of silence to cut as I look at this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting kind of low just because we have so many good ones at the top. So,
Yeah.
like I was starting to look around 40, but maybe even lower than that because we've got A Very Supernatural Christmas at 41, Jump the Shark at 42. I love those.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Angel is a douchebag is 53. I don't know, man.
Yeah, see, I don't see it anywhere below like 64 because I believe the children are our future. Like I have a lot of issues with that one, right? So I feel like that's a good stopping point for me and to look above that.
Yeah, maybe like right around 60 because then below that it's 60 is Simon Said, 61 is Roadkill, 62 No Exit. But above that, it's like
Yeah.
Nightmare, Scarecrow, Red Sky at Morning.
Yeah, and I do think it's better than those episodes.
Yeah.
Like Scarecrow, Red Sky at Morning
That
also.
was not a good one.
No, it wasn't.
Hollywood Babylon.
So like I feel like it turns like on Bad Day at Black Rock. Like that's a good one. Right? And like way better than Hollywood Babylon. So like where does it fit into that? I do see it above like Hollywood Babylon personally.
Me too, but maybe like right there.
Yeah.
Because then
Let me see.
I kind of
we have like a bunch of like funny episodes,
but I kind of like
but the next better. Like serious one. Yeah.
Just personally. Because I didn't have to like also accept things that I didn't like about the episode.
Correct. Yeah.
You know, I'm not like having to reconcile
like
the things I don't like about them. It's just funny and whatever.
I would be fine with that because I feel like, you know, what there was, what good there was in this episode that like advanced any sort of either character development or plot points or anything like that. I think there was a little of that. You know, it wasn't, if there was more for me, I think I would be able to rank it higher.
Yes, I agree with that too. Because there was some of that there, you know, and we liked it, what was there, but it didn't dominate the episode as much as it could have. Yeah, but if it had, it would have felt more like important.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm kind of okay with that because I'm looking lower and it's definitely, it doesn't belong with any of these. But I don't feel like it belongs with the ones above it either.
I feel good with that.
Yeah? Okay. So it would be a new 55. Below Bad Day at Black Rock, but above Hollywood Babylon. So season 5, episode 11, Sam Interrupted is going in as the new number 55. And this one's going in the trunk.
Pudding!
Yay!
Pudding!
Perhaps the greatest thing that came from this episode is that.
It might be. Also, Martin's clown paintings.
Yeah, a Gacy reference for sure, and a Hannibal reference.
Yeah, that was
I
really
love that.
Oh man. Okay, I am good with all of that. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we wrap up?
Nope. The next episode is Swap Meet, and I do really love this episode. It's a funny and it's a lot of fun. So I'm excited to watch it and talk about it. And great quotes. Maybe one of my favorite quotes from Sam.
Awesome. I'm down for a funny episode. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you guys should know where to find us by now. I hope so. But
I hope.
But if you don't, we have our blog at www.highway.tohellpodcast.com. We're also on Facebook, and we have a handle on Instagram and Twitter at Highway to Hell Podcast. You can also call and leave us a voicemail at 908-516-HELL, 908-516-4355. You can also email us any thoughts, questions, whatever you want at highwaytohellpodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, we'll see y'all on the highway to hell. Bye.
Bye.